I work as a claims adjuster for auto accidents. A customer filed a claim after hours, and I follow up with him first thing this morning. I have no info on the vehicle other than what he reported, and I inform him there is a possibility of it being a total loss. He immediately jumps down my throat and tells me he doesn't want his car to be a total loss, and he doesn't want me to have it moved to another location for an in-person inspection. I start to discuss an alternative with him when he starts cursing at me and berating me, constantly interrupting me, telling me to just pay the claim. If it were that easy of a job, I'd be paid less and my job would be a hell of a lot easier. I explained that per his insurance agreement, we have to inspect the vehicle before I can make a payment for his claim, and we need to see if it is going to be a total loss or repairable. He continues to be a butt, so I inform him that I will disconnect the call and try talking to him again when he has regained his composure. I hang up and go into a meeting, and he proceeds to call our customer service line over and over and over. He harassed a total of 4 women and refused to end the call until I accepted his call. I explained I was in a meeting and wouldn't be out for at least another 30 minutes or so. He continued to stay on the line with them for a few more minutes before hanging up and calling customer service again. I finally have a chance to call him back, and I explain that we can try to work with his shop in having them submit photos so we can do a preliminary check to at least see if the car is a total loss or not. He tells me he sent me photos from the night before. I explain that there were no attachments to the emails he sent me and that we need very specific photos to have the most accurate review. He proceeds to tell me it is my job to call the shop and request them, which is what I told him at the start of the call anyway. He then demands my cell phone number. I explain that I don't have a work cell phone. He states he wants my cell phone to be able to reach me over the weekend. I informed him I will not be providing that info to him. He demanded it a few more times before stating he wanted to talk with my supervisor. I stated she was already informed of the situation and would be reaching out to him when she is able to. I am not allowed to give out her contact info. He tells me that I need to have her call him immediately. I remind him that she is my supervisor and I cannot dictate her schedule. He proceeds to try to keep me on the phone until his demands are met. I inform him that I'm going to disconnect the call if there is nothing further to discuss, and he ends the call. I called the shop, and they also gave me attitude stating that I was keeping a good man from his job and that I shouldn't be wasting his time like this. I asked if they could email the photos to me just so that I can get it done, and they say they will. I have an uncommon last name, so I made sure to spell it out for them multiple times since it is part of my email address. 2 hours before I leave for the day, I still don't have the photos. I text the customer and let him know, and he told me he would call them. 5 minutes before I'm supposed to leave, I call the shop again and don't get an answer or option to leave a message. I text the customer to let him know that photos aren't received yet and we won't be able to move forward on his claim until Monday. He starts blaming me for working in a different time zone, stating it isn't fair that I work 3 hours ahead of him. I explained that I don't work 3 hours ahead of him. I'm just 1 hour ahead, and the shop had all day to send me the photos needed. He now states that since he doesn't have a rental, didn't purchase the coverage, he is going to be fired on Monday, and it's all my fault. I offer to set him up with a discounted rental, and he tells me he doesn't have a rental company in his area, but it's still my fault for him losing his job. Goodness gracious, I'm so sorry to hear that. You mean to tell me that your employer is so heartless as to fire you for missing a workday unexpectedly when it's your first occurrence infraction with them? You may want to contact your state Department of Labor then. He tells me I should just pay the claim, and I'm holding up his claim for no reason to make life difficult for him. I wonder what he thinks happens to adjusters who don't follow due diligence on a claim and just pay it. We don't get cookies, that's for sure. In fact, we face termination with our employer, fines with the state the claim was handled in, and possible jail time. Oh yeah, and our employer can sue us for the money we paid to the customer without authorization, and if the customer knowingly cashes the check when they know their claim wasn't supposed to have been paid out, they get reported to the federal government for insurance fraud and sued by the insurance company for repayment of the claim. I guess I'll see what he has to say on Monday. My supervisor has been reading my notes and keeping up to date with the claim, and she is going to have a very fun conversation with him, especially when all the calls exhibiting his bad behavior were recorded. ETA. This is a single vehicle accident where the customer hit a large object in the road that he absolutely should have seen. I won't state the specifics just in case. He did not file a police report, and he wanted to send me photos from the scene of the accident, which took place at night, and became more irate when I stated I need a VN photo from the sticker inside his driver's side door. First off, I'll provide a little backstory. This was about 4 years ago, when I was 16. At the time, a politician in one of our active political parties of the city was under investigation for an ATM robbery she supposedly took part in because they had found the getaway car in her backyard along with bullet shells that used to crack the thing open. The problem was she had a good lawyer who claimed her car was stolen by the people who did the actual crime. This was not a very plausible story, considering she already was on a watch list surrounding drug abuse, but it was enough to keep the authorities from actually being able to convict her. Now that that's clear, here's where I, or rather me and some friends, come in. On a Saturday evening, we had decided to go see a movie in the movie theater. It was a late-night movie, so from 10 p.m. to midnight. After that, we decided to take an alternate route home on our bikes. We all lived close to each other, so we rode together. This route was a little longer over a very long street, but it was better lit. This also happened to be the street the politician lived in. As we were riding along this street, we noticed a person walking her dog in the distance. Well, walking was a big word. She was more like skipping, flailing her arms in the air while pulling her poor dog along that clearly had no idea what was going on with her. As we got closer, we moved from the bike lane, as she was using it to walk on, onto the street that was empty of cars. Suddenly, my friend that was riding next to me said, "Isn't that the witch from that certain political party?" I know, not a very nice thing to say, but he said it very quietly so as to not have her hear it. At least, that's what he thought. As we rode past her, she started screaming stuff at us. We couldn't understand what was going on and were convinced she hadn't heard what my friend had said, so we started checking if maybe we had dropped something. We kept biking though, since we didn't trust the situation and didn't want to stop. We figured she was just extremely intoxicated and kept going. Fast forward a minute or two. We're still riding on the same street. As I said, a very long street, when a car pulls up behind us. We move back onto the bike lane so it can safely pass. But instead of that happening, the car crosses the stroke of grass that separated the road from the bike lane and pulls right in front of us. Surprise, surprise, it's the woman from earlier. She gets out of the car, screaming how offensive and disrespectful we are that we just say stuff like that. As we are on bikes, we evade the car, panicking out of our minds because we are being chased by a crazy woman that was clearly on drugs. This goes on for another 2 times, her trying to block us and us dodging her car before we decide to try and lose her by turning into a different street. Considering our town can be like a maze in certain areas, we actually do lose her by randomly turning left and right. As we notice she isn't behind us anymore, we pull over to try and calm down. After a minute, we start talking about what to do. One of my friends says we should just go home, but while our panic is fading away, it gets replaced with anger on my side. I never had a good temper and really cannot handle disrespect well, though I worked on it and it's a lot better now. But at that time, I decided to do something else and go home. I pull out my phone and call the police. I explain the entire story and where we were, and they say someone will be there in a couple of minutes. The police station was pretty close. I say to my friends they can go home if they want, but that I'm going back to see what happens. One of them decides to go home. The other one follows me back. As we get back on the long street, it doesn't take long before we run into her again, as she was still looking for us. Again, she blocks us off, but this time we stop as well. Keeping our distance, we start sort of asking her what's her problem as she continues yelling how disrespectful we are as she tries to come close to do God knows what. Bad timing on her part. The police show up as she leaps for my friend, who easily dodged her since she's under the influence of something not very good. They take her down and cuff her, and as one of them starts asking us questions about what happened, the other cop searches the car. For some reason, she gets very aggressive towards Cop 2 when he opens the car door. Turns out, there were a lot of very illegal drugs in the trunk. But not only that, apparently our dearest politician had decided to get rid of all the evidence the police hadn't found yet surrounding the ATM robbery together with her drug stash, and had been planning to do that the day after that Saturday. So not only did they find drugs, but also a lot of cash that the serial numbers of matched the ones that were stolen from the ATM in question, together with a gun and homemade explosive devices. 2 months later, She has to pay up a huge fine and is sentenced to 7 years in prison. I remember having to go to court to share the story a couple of times. So yeah, she should have thought about chasing some high schoolers a little better, especially with all the necessary evidence to a crime she committed in the very car she used for the chase. In 2013, back when I was working at a movie theater in my town in a rich, uppy area, right after Wolf of Wall Street came out, it caused problems. Now, working at a movie theater, you can usually just tell after a while what people know what they want and people who think they know what they want but have no idea what they are getting into. After a lot of refunds for Wolf of Wall Street and because of a certain inappropriate scene, we were told to warn people exactly what they were getting into. Because we were getting a lot of refunds every show and we were too busy to not keep them waiting a while, so it was my job. So Q, our little old lady, we will call Agnes. Agnes was a little old lady who was a short but large woman with a very short pixie cut. She wore activewear leggings, an overly large t-shirt, and a fanny pack. She waddled over to my ticket booth, fishing her money out of her fanny pack. "1 ticket to Wolf of Wall Street," Agnes stated before yelling loudly, "Senior!" Yes, Agnes, I can tell you need a senior, and yes, she was not the type for this movie. Okay, but just so you know, it's R-rated. I started, but she groaned and rolled her eyes, slapping her hand on the table. "Just do your job and give me a ticket. I'm going to be late," Agnes stated. Cue my malicious compliance. "1 senior coming up?" I handed her the ticket as she snatched it out of my hand and waddled off to the theater. I waved goodbye. As if on cue, 30 minutes into her entering the theater, she, like most people who have no idea what they are getting into, walks out of the theater. I was about to call my manager with glee for a refund, happy for my subtle revenge, when I realized she had just come out to make a call. All my hopes and dreams crumbled. Maybe I misread her, but she was for sure not the type to enjoy this movie. I sighed in defeat and went back to waiting for movies to get out. That was until not long after her call. 3 police cars with flashing lights pulled up to the front of my theater. I paused in noticeable confusion as 6 police officers came in with their hands on their side pistols. Since I was in the ticket booth, they approached me. "Ma'am, we got a call about some illegal films here," the police officer, who we will call Robert, stated. I started in a loud, long, continuous ugh. My eyes slowly drifted to Agnes, who was waddling quickly up to me. "Arrest her," Agnes demanded as I just continued my continuous and arrest them too," she pointed to the concession workers in loud, noticeable anger. "For what reason, ma'am?" Robert asked, now seeing how calm and quiet the theater was because the movies were in. "For that disgusting illegal thing of what they are trying to say is a movie." Agnes huffed. She was red in the face and panting. "I demand you shut this place down." "Were you the one that called about the children engaging in adult activities illegally?" Robert asked as completely went dead silent. "Child, what? We had nothing remotely like that here or ever." "Yes," Agnes stated. "That thing in there, that Wolf of Wall Street is illegal. They cannot show that kind of trash in there." "Ma'am, I saw that movie. There's nothing really illegal in it, and there are no children engaging in adult activities illegally in it either." Robert started pretty ticked off. "Is this why you called us?" "Yes, because back in my day, the police would have shut this place down." Agnes was screaming her head off as 2 of the officers got the hint and just left. "Ma'am, do you know what you did is illegal? It is filing a false police report. 911 is for emergencies only, not for your bad movie reviews." Robert had enough of her at this point. "But I didn't file a false police report," Agnes whined as Robert turned to me in a very, very nice tone. "Have a great day, ma'am." He beamed with obvious annoyance. They started to file out and Agnes angrily followed them, yelling to them. Right when Robert was about to exit the door, Agnes grabbed the push bar for the door and yanked it back to keep the door closed to not let him leave, hitting Robert with the door. Yes, if you're wondering, that does count as assaulting an officer. Last I saw, Agnes was escorted to the police cruiser with shiny new arm bracelets, though I'm not sure what happened to her. But I never saw Agnes again. I did see Robert, though. He got a free movie on me, but it was busy and I couldn't talk to him to see what happened with our dear friend. But I can tell it was just amazing things.